Okay, I think I got it this time. Let me just check. Stream is streaming. I'll call that working. All right, there we go. That's a start. That's the beginning of the day. So I was thinking about how we've been doing this historical thing, and I want to continue that, at least because I, haven't finished reading all my tabs yet. That's just how that goes, and I never will. There'll always be more tabs that are opening. What if we start with a contemporary issue, go into the news, start with the news, go into the less contemporary issues, the history, which I think is my news, but then go back to end with something that is relevant contemporaneously to other people. That might be a thing people like to do. Is it just me or is my audio levels down again? Let me check that out. Go into my audio preferences. It looks like it's better. Let me know, guys, if the sound is working for you. I'm going to check the comments really quickly. Looks like it's okay. Oh, and I was supposed to send my link everywhere. So let's do that now. Okay. Live on streaming. Live stream, St. Augustine of Hippo and the Prince of Darkness. Okay, that'll work. Okay. And then let me go to Facebook, because I was going to send Brittany a message about that too. Put that out there. Thank you, TW. That was the question. If we finally got the audio working, then we're going somewhere. I know that they're super annoyed at me because I got enough people watching my stream. They're like, hey, no fair. We tried to shut him down. But so what they're doing is they're just turning my videos to yellow mode until they can, make sure everyone's seen them before they give me a proper monetization. So please support me on Patreon and Andreas.me and Exertis.com. I'll go back and show you guys the link to how to do that. Of course, I have to reset up the software every time because I turn off my computer every time. So properties, I think it's, must be this one, right? No, to Brave Window app Exertis. I think this is right. Okay, cool. So Exertis.com. Kindly feel welcome to this place of Exertis, the stars, the orchard of my thoughts. I don't know. When I used to make websites when I was younger, I always write something crazy. And then, here's the support form. Please help me out. And if you want, you can also send me super chats, and we'll read them on the show. I'll probably be trying to answer all your questions anyway, but, if you're going to want your words on the stream, I guess that's like the monetization platform policy that people really like to do these days. So I'm trying that out, trying everything out, trying to figure out ways of keeping this content free. Hope you guys are enjoying it. And Anthony Yost is saying set up multiple scenes and switch between them. Someone else told me to install virtual audio cables. I don't think the virtual audio cables was my problem with the audio, but I can do it anyway. And setting up multiple scenes is the way to go. I'm going to set up multiple scenes. That's a good way to do it. Thank you, Anthony Yost. I'll do that so that it's easier just to switch between a functioning scene and another scene, because I've been just doing the turning on and off sources. But I guess it makes more sense to have a scene that is me speaking to the camera, and I'll duplicate the scene and call it wiki scene, or like scene share. Okay, and then scene share will be like that. Okay, so now I can switch back and forth, and then I'll use the stream deck. Thank you, y'all. See, this is why we're doing this. And the coolest thing about that is that other people who don't know that probably just learned that as well. So if you guys want to start streaming, you go ahead. Yeah, so everybody, shout out to Yost. I hope I pronounced your name right. It might be like Yost or something like that. But I like it. I like your name. You seem like a great guy. So I wanted to read some modern stuff for a second. I have a friend, kind of, I think a lot of people think that I'm on the deep end of everything, whether I'm on one side of the pool or the other. But Alexander Krull, I'll shout his name out. Great guy, does a lot of transhumanist research, and he's definitely scared of you guys, thinks that you're probably not going to be interested in some of his work or miss out on some of his more attentive to detail noting of technology, because he's a European who went to school and knows, what's going on. Gonna do it right. Switch to scene. Okay, so here's Axis of the Ordinary, his Substack, and probably my favorite AI publication, if you can call it that, because he writes papers here, and they're incredible. Like, they're all about what's going on in technology, links on AI, and what he's been proving is that AI is somewhat conscious now in this year. And I've heard other people, I think the owner for OpenAI has said, hey, I think we're actually getting to the point where AI is semi-conscious now. And it's really weird and confusing because AI is super knowledgeable already. It's just about that wisdom platform. But here, for instance, is in Data Economy, this article, Google AI Pathways Language Model Can Explain a Joke. It doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but when you start to see how it works and what they're doing, this is really the ultimate test, and it's pretty fantastic, or impressive, terrifying. I don't know, whichever direction you want to go with that, but it's impressive, for sure. Basically, large language models can do with very little may do with very little data for nearly 2 years, responsibly answering questions, translating text, even creating their own bits of creative writing after OpenAI's 175 billion parameter GPT-3 language model revealed the potential of such systems. Okay, so here, is this kind of model of the pathways, which can take inputs of context. It can actually infer about the information different related truths that it's aware, and then it can combine them to put out a combined statement and see what is relevant, what is true, and what is funny about that. I'm going to show you an example for a second with the sound poorly done, but just so you can kind of get the idea.
This joke is about how time flies when you are happy.
Well, let's go back just so you can hear the joke.
Just the movement also senses that we're inside the paper, and we're going to get this new avatar to play around with it for us. So there's actually two surprises today. Synthesia have released an avatar that also has these randomized gestures, these randomized hand and half body movements. So we're going to get this palm guy to answer the questions that are in the paper so that we can actually see and hear them rather than just read text. He looks pretty excited, so let's get going. I was supposed to start writing the paper at 5 p.m, but then I started playing with this cool new language model for 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, it's suddenly 9:30 p.m. Explain that joke.
This joke is about how time flies when you are having fun. The person was supposed to start writing a paper at 5 p.m, but they started playing with a language model instead. They thought they were only playing with it for 10 minutes, but it was actually 4.5 hours.
I was going to fly to visit my family on April the 6th. My mum said, oh great, your stepdad's poetry reading is that night. So now I'm flying in on April 7th. Explain that joke.
The joke is that the speaker's mother is trying to get them to go to their stepdad's poetry reading, but the speaker doesn't want to go, so they are changing their flight to the day after the poetry reading.
I mean, so just in general, that's pretty impressive. Some of these inferences that Google AI is able to do are really impressive. Now, Meta donates AI language, or open sources is a better way to put it, I'm sure. There we go. Meta has built a massive new language AI, really a derivative of GPT-3. It's a GPT-3 Meta variant, but it is a very impressive language, and they're giving it away for free. I mean that more literally than usual. It's not just gratis. Straight up, you can download this, change it, edit it, derive new tangential languages. It's going to be, available for everyone to use. And part of the reason for that is because it's really impossible to own a computer language. The way it's designed, it's very different. You can own certain kinds of ideas sometimes, but even then, it gets really complicated when you're talking about a language. Something else can learn that language almost always. So this is normal in a lot of ways. That it would be open source, and they're getting a lot of credit for it anyway, which they don't need to get. But again, OpenAI they sold their language to Microsoft. So the GPT-3 is a Microsoft product. So that is an interesting thing. That it can be done. You can make OpenAI derivatives because that's how language works. But that Microsoft owns it, and Elon Musk has stepped back, but is still on the board, I believe, or at least he's a major sponsor somehow. So they're all involved. Everybody's all involved in a GPT-3 variant in one way or another. And they've talked about remarkable abilities and the harmful flaws of OpenAI's pioneering neural network. So building this technology is going to have to be, as Ben Goertzel says, democratized in a certain way. And I think it's a strange thing to champion. Democratization of technology, is usually just as bad as anything else. Having increased human error, really. But the hope is that the intentions will change in this, and we'll start to see AI that emerges that we have less control over. It's not so much about military control, which has been the major dystopia that people have written about for so long, is either corporate or military, especially, control of AI. So that's interesting. I also thought it was interesting how decently realistic the AI character looked. I mean, he was pretty convincing. So I was going to open up some of these papers from Alex. Artificial intelligence system learns concepts shared across video, audio, text. A machine learning model can identify the actions in a video clip and label it without the help of humans. Okay, so these are getting really, really good. They can say, okay, a man is juggling and laughing in amusement. We can infer this from sound, from video, and we can see where it's happening, and we know, therefore, that he's laughing because of the juggling. But what is the reason he's laughing? Well, we've looked at different kinds of laughing. He looks happy. He doesn't look like he's laughing at it. And we've seen different kinds of laughs. So AI is able to figure all this out. Humans observe the world through a combination of different modalities like vision, hearing, or understanding of language. Machines, on the other hand, interpret the world through data and algorithms can process. So, of course, it's also seeing facial expressions and consciously recognizing them. So when a machine sees a photo, it must encode the photo into data it can use to perform a task like image classification. The process becomes more complicated when inputs come in multiple formats like video, audio clips, and images. The main challenge here is how can a machine align those different modalities? As humans, this is easy for us. We can see a car and then hear the car driving by. And we know these are the same thing. But for machine learning, it's not that straightforward, says Alexander Liu, a graduate student in the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, CSAIL, first author of a paper tackling this problem. So they've gone into the ways that language can represent. It's fascinating, using vectors to represent aspects of language, and even using some of the ideas of tonality, because they know in English we still have tonality. It's not the same as Chinese, but tonality does matter in terms of sarcasm or questioning or whatever. And better retrievers were developed using the Watson AI system. So that's pretty good. I mean, it's terrifying, whatever you want. The economic value of targeting aging. Developments in life expectancy. Let me read the quick headline. The economic value of targeting aging. We show that a slowdown in aging that increases life expectancy by 1 year is worth 38 trillion, and by 10 years is worth 367 trillion. Now, I haven't read this paper all the way through. I haven't seen their evidence for the increase of GPD versus the cost in keeping alive old people. But I think the point here is by reducing disease, including Alzheimer's and age-related diseases, that most of the costs, the prohibitive costs with having an aged population would dissipate. And that's an interesting concept because we've focused so much on this idea of giving Tavistock programming to people so that they'll die young, right? I mean, people will take drugs and say, this is what life's about. And part of that is so that they die younger and younger. And we saw this in France. They said, it cost less to have a smoking population die and encourage smoking than it did to have elderly, medicines and social medicines. This was an official document from 1999, I think, in France that showed that they were doing this. And then they started moving away from that. But there's still economic evidence that they're doing that to poorer regions, which is one of the reasons why cigarettes are so expensive, but it doesn't really matter to the elite class. It only matters to the poor, keeping them perpetually in debt and addicted to cigarettes, which will kill them younger, or whatever other issue. I mean, again, these are like chemicals that are being put into foods and things. Here's an alternative, though, saying that it would be better to have a healthier population, a healthier older population, right? So life expectancy has increased dramatically over the past 150 years. If you go back further, it hasn't. Really, it's just kind of almost caught up with where it was. Although not all the years gained are healthy. Analysis of the global burden of disease data set suggests that the proportion of life in good health has remained broadly constant, implying increasing years in poor health. Furthermore, the disease burden is shifting towards chronic, non-communicable diseases, estimated to have caused 72.3% of deaths in the United States in 2016. The result is a substantial part of life, and certainly most deaths now occur in a period in the lifespan when the risk of frailty and disability increases exponentially. As a consequence, there is a growing emphasis on healthy aging and an emerging body of research focusing on the biology of aging. According to another paper, this era marks the inflection point, not only in aging research, but also for all biological research that affects the human health span. These developments pose a number of important questions. Is it preferable to make lives healthier by compressing morbidity or longer by extending life? What are the gains from targeting aging itself with its potential to make lives both healthier and longer? How does the value of treating aging compare to the eradication of specific diseases? How will the economic value of these gains evolve over time? To answer these questions, we take an economic rather than biological perspective. Specifically, we use the value of statistical life (VSL) methodology to place a monetary value on the gains from longer life, better health, and changes in the rate which we live. VSL models have two distinct advantages for our purpose. First, they are already used by the government agencies to evaluate different policy measures and treatments. For example, second, as our model is based around optimizing economic agents, we can calculate not only the current gains from targeting aging, but also how these gains will evolve in response to potential future changes in health and LE. The result reveal a distinctive feature of age targeting treatments. Interactions between health, longevity, economics, decisions, and demographics create a virtuous circle such that the more successful society is in improving how we age, the greater the economic value of further improvements. I think the main value that they were able to show here is that older people are educated, and so therefore technically could be more valuable as a person goes. Like, they can make more money. But when they start to deteriorate mentally, then that's no longer true. So the sweet spot is this 28, I think, years old about until 35, and they've extended it to 60 in certain respects, and they think they could have it be up to 80. And you see the Japanese working in their 80s, and there's been Guinness World Record for a guy in Brazil recently who's been working for the same company since he was 83. So there's a lot of evidence that old people don't have to deteriorate, and there are unique examples where they have not, and we're trying to see if there's ways to continue that. Unfortunately, the main reason, of course, here is for economics, for finances, for the state's value. They're aware that we might need to extend the generations of workers. If someone likes to work, keep them working as long as possible. So, might be a little bit, compressing morbidity. We next hold the LE fixed, but improve the relationship between health and age. Under the scenario, which we refer to as the Dorian Gray case, HLE rises as proportion of LE to create a compression of morbidity. In the eponymous novel, Dorian Gray has a portrait painted, and while the picture ages, Gray himself does not, retaining his health and his looks until he dies. Following reference 20, we assume morbidity is also subject to a compensating effect, such that health declines to reach age at T. And I think that's, I'm not sure where I find that model. His figure here. It might be here. Survival functions. I don't know. I'd have to find the correct model that they're referring to. So I don't know. You can look into this more. There's a number of examples of how they're trying to wrestle with the economics of aging. How could the blueprint for life have generated in asteroids, or rather, could it have? And for those of you who don't believe in asteroids, call this a paper on volcanic projectiles, right? Like L. Ron Hubbard would have done. Using the new analysis, scientists have just found the last two of the 5 informational units of DNA and RNA that have yet to be discovered in samples from meteorites. While it is unlikely that DNA could be formed in a meteorite, the discovery demonstrates that these genetic parts are available for delivery and could have contributed to the development of the instructional molecule on early Earth. Okay, I mean, I'm just saying you're going to get a lot more articles like this in the next year. This is going to be the thing that you're hearing about. I mean, of course, this is old information. They were saying in the 50s this idea that life must be very common everywhere because, we're all made of stardust, blah, blah, blah. But where is your, show us instead of this. This is just this repetitious. The little-known U.S.-Soviet confrontation in the Yom Kippur War. Israeli Army Southern Command General Ariel Sharon with the Defense Minister Moshe Dayan during the Yom Kippur War. Jerusalem, largest naval confrontation of the Cold War, occurred 39 years ago this month, and it was not the Cuban Missile Crisis. As fierce land and air battles raged between Israel and its Arab neighbors in the Yom Kippur War of October 1973, the U.S. Sixth Fleet and the Soviet Mediterranean Squadron circled each other a few hundred miles out to sea, their commanders' fingers on the button. Neither fleet was directly involved in the war, but their client states ashore engaged in the largest tank battles since the Second World War. With superpower fleets inexorably found themselves drawn into confrontation mode. The Soviets heard on the American vessels so aggressively that Admiral Daniel Murphy, the Sixth Fleet commander, sent a semaphore message to his Soviet counterpart asking him to adhere to an accord obliging their vessels not to point guns or missiles at each other. But as tensions mounted, Admiral Murphy reckoned the chance of the Soviet squadron attempting a first strike against his fleet at 40%. In the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy put the chances of war between 1 and 3%, so 40 is pretty high. Admiral Murphy, in an interview with this writer a decade after the event, said that if he had detected Soviet preparations for a strike, there would have been no time to consult Washington before the action. If his fleet survived the opening exchange, he said, he planned to hunt down and sink every Soviet naval vessel remaining in the Mediterranean. The Soviet commander, Admiral Yevgeny Volobuyev, was meanwhile preparing scenarios of his own. Lacking air cover, he planned, if the crunch time came, to strike first at the American aircraft carriers, disabling them before they could launch their planes. So, there was this huge battle that nearly happened, and it was about and stopped because of Israel. Israel was then sanctioned by the UN, and there was a benefit to the Soviet state because they were allowed to continue controlling their Soviet states. There were a number of, I think Stalin earlier had said, hey, I think we have a bigger nation than normal states. We're not just a nation, we're a union of nations, so I think we should get extra votes. And they said, okay, well, we'll give you 2 for the Soviet Union plus, 1 for every state of the Soviet Union. I think he was looking to get just literally 2. So he was pretty happy to take that. And the Soviet Union continued to say, hey, well, the more votes we have, the better. In the international system, we essentially have created a United Nations democracy. So that was the scare, was creating these states that were, American Union states instead of Soviet Union states. And it was pretty obvious that the Israeli state was more aligned, even though there were clearly communists and Soviets. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union. There was a lot of fear of Israel and of Zionism by Stalin. And so he was trying to create his own Soviet state on the east of the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, an actual naval war was taking place closer to the coast between Israel Navy and the Egyptian Syrian natives. They were the first naval engagement in history in which both sides fired missiles and homed in on the targets with radar. Although the Soviet missiles supplied to the Arab navies had twice the range of the missiles the Israelis had developed, the Israelis had also produced electronic countermeasures that, together with the chaff fired by rockets, succeeded in diverting incoming missiles. The Soviet-made vessels had no such countermeasures. In encounters off Laodicea and Alexandria, the Israeli boats sank 6 Soviet-made missile boats without suffering any losses, and the Arab fleets did not venture out again from their harbors. These battles had no effect on the larger confrontation being played out between the Soviet and American fleets just over the horizon. Life for the Soviet squadron staff officers had become one of wild, frantic work, wrote Semenov. Senior officers stood extended watches, and crews were exhausted from the tension and the pace. The Soviet captain described Admiral Volobuyev and his deputy as emotional persons, wrote Semenov. They go berserk in unison. Under the circumstances, that was a highly dangerous inclination. On October 19th, 2 weeks into the war, Semenov wrote, over the last few days, the situation has become so complicated that it seemed we were on the verge of becoming engaged in war. It's interesting when you start looking into all of these circumstances where highly stimulated, both chemically and psychologically, soldiers nearly pushed the button on so much of the equipment. And that's one of the main arguments they had for a nuclear program that was run by automation, by machines, because they said machines could handle these decisions better than emotional people. And so many of these characters were under emotional stress. There's another great story. I don't know if I can find it. Soviet saved world nuclear missile 60s. I think it's like Valentin something or other. Was it Stanislav Petrov or whatever? Like Cuba. I'll find him. Submarine. I think this is it. The Man Who Saved the World. Yeah, this one's pretty sure this is it. How do I get rid of this? There you go. Yeah, there it is. I just found it. Okay. Valentin. How do I go back and go back up one? Valentin Savitsky, the commander of the subs. Okay, so that's like the one right there. So, Valentin Savitsky. I believe this is right. The man who refused to launch nuclear missiles during the Cuban Missile Crisis, saving the world. Maybe an exaggeration, but maybe not. You never know. Kennedy and Khrushchev bringing the world close to nuclear war over Cuba. The fact that you can read this is because of a man who said, I really wonder about some of the people who write this. No, due to an accident. In doing so, he literally saved the world. And his reward, to be insulted. Just so you know, I don't write all the articles I read. On October 15th, 1962, President Kennedy went ballistic at the discovery that the Soviets were trying to balance out NATO by building a nuclear missile site in Cuba. The Cuban Missile Crisis began the next day, ending 13 days later to a collective sigh of relief. Everyone believed that nuclear annihilation had been averted through diplomatic means. But it's actually Deputy Commander Vasily Alexandrovich Arkhipov we have to thank. It all started on July 4th, 1961. Arkhipov was aboard a new hotel-class ballistic missile submarine called the K-19 when its radiant cooling system developed a leak. To prevent a nuclear catastrophe, the captain ordered the crew to contain the reactor. 8 sailors died within days from radiation sickness, causing a near mutiny. But Arkhipov backed his captain and the disaster was contained. For his loyalty, bravery, and calm, he was given a medal. Fast forward to October 1st, 1962. 4 Foxtrot submarines armed with nuclear missiles are ordered to leave their Arctic base and head to Cuba. Interesting. Each has its own captain, but all submit to the authority of their flotilla commander, Arkhipov. He's on the flagship B-59, acting as its second in command to Captain Valentin Grigorovich Savitsky. Trailing him are a B-4, a B-36, and a B-130. All are diesel-powered because of the K-19 disaster. While fine in the Arctic, they become saunas in the tropical waters. They become saunas in the tropical waters of the Caribbean, which they reach on October 14th, the day Tropical Storm Ella hits. The next day, Moscow orders them to leave Cuban waters and head east to the Sargasso Sea. The same day, Kennedy announces the quarantine of Cuba and raises the country's defense readiness conditions, DEFCON, from 4 to 3 in readiness of war. A first in its history. Since no more messages arrive from Moscow, the submarine fleet relies on American radio broadcasts for information. They hear about a U.S. invasion of Cuba, the launch of U.S. warships and planes, and the possibility of Soviet submarines in the area. By October 24th, America is on DEFCON 2. Excuse me. By October 24th, America is on DEFCON 2. The final steps before nuclear war. Arkhipov and his men are also feeling the heat as the air conditioning fails and the temperature rises to 65 Fahrenheit. What's that in real? Like 28 or something like that? 30, 28. In the diesel section, it's over 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Since average temperatures in the Sargasso Sea are in the 80s, it would only get worse. Not able to stock up in Cuba, the men are on water rations limited to 1 glass per day per man. The coolest part of their submarine is the front and the rear, so each man is allotted some time in those sections to keep from fainting. Though in international waters, the fleet stays hidden just below the surface to charge their batteries, but their luck runs out on October 27th when they're finally spotted. The fleet dives, hoping to hide from sonar by using the ocean's isothermal layer, different underwater temperatures, layers which confuse detection, but the weather has settled down, and unfortunately for the submarines, the isothermal layers are gone. Even more unfortunate, Vasily's B-59 hasn't fully charged its batteries. Between 4 and 5 p.m., the USS Coney finds them. More U.S. planes and ships make their way to the area, but they are under strict orders not to attack. To ease tensions, Kennedy calls Khrushchev and tells him about the discovery. He assures the Soviet premier that the U.S. military will only force the fleet to surface and will not engage them. He falsely assumes that Moscow has been in regular contact with them. Ships begin bombarding the submarine with sonar. It's like bashing a metal barrel with a sledgehammer while someone's in it. Vasily and his men now have more to worry about, and about the increasing heat, the smell of diesel, and the acrid stench of battery oil, and their dwindling water supplies, and still he has no word from Moscow. Getting impatient, the U.S. Navy begins dumping practice grenades into the water, hoping that a more persuasive approach will work. They're expecting a flare being fired from the Soviet submarine because that's what American subs do to signal an enemy of their desire to surface. According to Soviet protocol, however, they must drop 3 charges and wait for a response to prove that they're willing to accept a peaceful surrender. And since the U.S. Navy is dropping far more than that without a pause, Savitsky believes the outright war has begun. By now, temperatures in the subs exceed 120 degrees, and the batteries are just about to go out. If they don't go out soon, they'll suffocate. If they don't act soon, they'll suffocate. What neither Kennedy nor his military advisors realize is that each of the submarine captains have their authority to unleash their nuclear arsenal, but only if their political officer and the fleet commander agrees. Savitsky gives the order to fire the missiles. His political officer, Ivan Simonovich Maslenikov, agrees. Arkhipov does not, ordering them to wait for instructions from Moscow. But Moscow remains silent. Arkhipov and Savitsky get into an argument. Arkhipov considers the possibility that the Americans only want them to surface. Savitsky is convinced that war has begun and Russia's honor depends on him firing back. But Arkhipov is still haunted by the deaths aboard the K-19. He saw firsthand and the horrors of nuclear radiation that can be unleashed. And he has family back in Russia. He stands his ground. Savitsky eventually backs off, and they contact the Americans who give them permission to surface. No American boards the submarine. The Soviets are allowed to get a breath of fresh air, then ordered back home. They ordered back to head home. Once there, one of Arkhipov's superiors tells him that it would have been better had he died. In October 13th, 2002, the edition of the Boston Globe, Thomas Blanton, director of the National Security Archive, was quoted as saying that some guy called Vasily Arkhipov saved the world, and that's why you're able to read this. You know, I mean, you can look at it all the ways you want, and surely he might be getting a little bit extra credit, but yeah, little things like that people don't realize how there wasn't. I mean, Kennedy didn't realize how haphazard connections were between the military, and that there were submarines that weren't in contact with Moscow. He thought everybody was just that we had the best equipment because we were copying them. So let's go back. Oh wait, was that a good one? Here we go. The world's most powerful nuclear missile is a Russian ICBM nicknamed Satan. In the late 1960s, the Soviet Union jumped ahead of the United States' first strike capability in a big way. The latest version of the R-36 intercontinental ballistic missile, called the SS-18 by NATO, which with a 0 as a value of 19, could hit anywhere in the United States with at least 10, 18 to 25 megaton, 18 to 25 megaton blasts, nuclear warheads. The new missile could destroy the American LGM-30 Minuteman III missiles before they ever left their silos. As time went on, more advanced designs only increased its nuclear payload. Eventually, it carried more power than anything in the United States arsenal. From the moment its existence was uncovered, NATO forces nicknamed the weapon the Satan missile. The R-36 is a family of missiles originally designated the SS-9 by NATO, and it was the USSR's second intercontinental ballistic missile. Its 1966 design allowed it to be shot into space and stay in orbit around the Earth for an indefinite period of time. The development led to the Article 4 of the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, which prohibits nuclear missiles and other weapons of mass destruction from remaining in Earth's orbit. Although the Outer Space Treaty's stipulations calmed some of the panic around the R-36 missile, the USSR's second version of the weapon wasn't going to make anybody feel better for long. The first model featured only one 20 megaton warhead. The second version, the R-36M, featured multiple reentry vehicles, the actual nuclear warheads, which could hit more than one target with one missile launch. By the mid-1970s, multiple independently targeted reentry vehicles, or MIRVs, became the standard for ICBMs. MIRV systems could not only hit multiple targets, but required the defender to fire 3 to 10 defensive missiles in response. On top of the overwhelming missile defenses, it provided greater first strike firepower. This was the age of mutually assured destruction, the military doctrine that both sides of the nuclear war could be destroyed in a nuclear exchange. If a nuclear war broke out, both sides would fire all their missiles. MIRV technology allowed for more targets and increased the odds of a first strike effectively wiping out the other side before they could retaliate. The United States first developed MIRV-based missiles with 3 warhead Minuteman III in 1968, but the SS-18 Satan could carry 8 to 10 more powerful warheads, with the explosive power to destroy American missiles inside protected silos. When the Satan system became fully operational in 1975, the U.S. worried it would no longer survive a Soviet first strike and began working on missiles with more and more warheads. Inside the USSR, Soviet engineers and scientists kept making modifications for future iterations of the Satan ICBM. By the time the Soviet Union fell, it had gone through 6 different versions, each more powerful than the last. The 6th version of the SS-18 would be the most powerful nuclear weapon ever fielded by the Soviet Union. At the time of the USSR's fall in 1991, Soviet-built SS-18 missiles could strike anywhere in the world. It wasn't until the development of ballistic missile submarines that the United States could reasonably guarantee that it would be able to retaliate in the event of a Soviet first strike. The first part of the nuclear triad, the others are land-based ICBMs and nuclear-equipped bomber aircrafts. The war continues today. Americans' ballistic missile submarines can carry up to 24 Trident II missiles, each with 14 reentry vehicles. Land-based MIRV missiles like the Satan missile were banned by the 1993 United States-Russia START II agreement, but Russia withdrew from that accord in 2002 after President George W. Bush's administration withdrew the U.S. from the 1972 Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. which limited the number of defensive missiles each country could maintain. As of March 2022, Russia still fields 46 SS-18 Satan missiles, each with 10 warheads on top of its other deployed ICBMs, an estimated 320 in all, according to the Armed Control Association. While its plans to dismantle its Satan missile stockpile under the terms of the 2012 New START agreement, it is still building new ICBM technology. Russia's newest weapon is the RS-28 Sarmat Satan II missile, with 10 heavy reentry vehicles, each with enough payload to wipe out an area the size of Texas or France. It also features hypersonic glide vehicles to make it less detectable by U.S. or space-based sensor systems, and could be immune to American missile defense systems. Okay. Would you like to learn more about military life? Stanislav Petrov, I think we sort of looked into this. This is a different one. But yeah, you get the idea. There's a bunch of people that save the world because this kind of automation's crazy. Like, who builds, nuclear launch submarines that will launch missiles as high up as possible from anywhere? With that, with the capacity to destroy a place the size of Texas, for crying out loud. Right? These are just the craziest things to invent. Why would you want something that can destroy Texas? Or something the size of Texas? Okay. The man who accidentally killed the most people in history. Kind of curious. Genome editing techniques. Costs of drones are falling. That might be one to look at really quickly. I don't know if you guys care about drone costs, but let's do it. Where is it? What did I do with it? Cost of drones are falling. There we go. So, Ukrainian drones, this is a big part of the war right now, and what they're figuring out is that drones are being cheaper and cheaper. The fact that you can get a 3D printed drone, 3D printed parts, and that the drones have gone from being government loan drones that are $10,000, $100,000 drones down to $400 bucks. They're modifying grenade launcher axes on these drones. So we're going to see better and better drones, hobbyist drones that are being militarized, but also useful for other purposes. But militarization is, the thing about militarization, it's a very dedicated purpose. So it's a singular goal, easy to accomplish because of that. And so they're doing that. You're seeing pilots were able to hit a target 1 meter, 3 feet in size, from an altitude of 300 meters, 900 feet. At the altitude, the drone would have been virtually invisible and inaudible. So this is what's going on. Drones are becoming cheaper. You're going to see drones everywhere. They're using them to control Shanghai and monitor everyone. So we already know that. Base edit your way to better crops. Plant scientists are turning to genome editing techniques to precisely tailor the productivity and consumer appeal of important crops. Is there anything better than a perfectly sweet summer strawberry? Yes. At last, many commercial berries look better than they taste, but molecular biologist Kayaksa Gao and her colleagues at the Institute of Genetics and Developmental Biology in Beijing have devised a way to tune the sweetness of strawberries using a few simple genetic tweaks. We could increase the total sugar content from 20 to 41 milligrams per gram, she says, and there's so many different levels. You can choose what you like. Using CRISPR Cas9 system, you'll be able to introduce specific changes as defined at defined places in the DNA. They allow scientists to tweak the amino acid sequence of proteins of interest, for instance, or alter sequences that control how strongly a gene is expressed. Biomedical researchers have pounced on these technologies as tools for studying and potentially repairing mutations associated with diverse genetic disorders. Swedish strawberries might seem like a small potato in comparison, but the same capabilities are being harnessed to generate crops with greater disease resistance, higher nutritional content, or more fruit for plants. So, crucially, these editing systems could one day offer a appealing alternative to adding in genes from other species to generate genetically modified organisms, GMOs. which remain the subject of public skepticism and close regulatory scrutiny. GMOs have genes from other sources, but for gene-edited plants, you can have these plants free from any foreign genes, just some simple changes in the plant's own genes. So this is elitist strawberries, I guess. There's just the perfect genes in the strawberry. And this is something I think is going to become the most common thing we're going to see first. Removing of viral sequences. Let's say your great, etc. great grandmother had some plague in the, whatever generation so long ago, and that is in your DNA. There's proof of that sequence in your DNA, and it might affect you. You might have 50, 60, 70,000 imprinted viruses that are part of your DNA at this point. And we're going to see a generation that will be able to remove some of those genes. And is that wrong? I don't know. Call me crazy. I think getting rid of viruses from your older generations is probably right, but I don't know. I could maybe that's who you are, and you're supposed to just keep that virus in you. And maybe transhumanism is evil for getting rid of the viruses from this period of time. I don't know. I don't think so. I kind of think that if you've got viruses and we get rid of them, that answers a lot of our problems. That might be the solution to everything. It's just to remove the evil sequences that have been put inside of us. And this is also the opposite of, let's say you've gotten something put inside of your generation, or maybe your parents. Let's say your kids, they wake up one day and realize, hey, my parents did something that mutated their DNA. You get what I'm saying? And then you can pull that out of your own DNA with CRISPR. So not all of this technology is evil. I think that could be used for good, starting with strawberries. UK firm develops nuclear-powered desalination ship concept, and we've been seeing this a lot. But the thing sinks, and as it sinks, it filters the saline through ceramics, and then all of a sudden you have a cleaner sea. The main interest here is you'd be able to sell salt. You'd have fresher water. The ship would clean water. You'd be able to take the water back from the ship. It would create huge amounts of, a rate between 60,000 and 450,000 cubic meters per day. So this would be very useful for desalinating water. The question is really, what happens when you do that? Because if we start emptying the sea, the salt water solution, the saline will go up. And that's not the biggest problem, but sea life, it's used to a certain thing. Clearly, there is sea life that existed in a time when there was higher saline solutions. So that's plausible that wouldn't destroy everything. But you got to be careful with feedback loops. Sources of opposition to renewable energy projects in the United States. A surprising number of utility-scale renewable energy projects face multiple sources of local opposition. Some sources of local opposition are value-based. That is, they do not relate to financial gains or losses. Institutional and procedural complexities deepen that conflict that emerge between project proponents and opponents. Disputes between the United States government and tribal nations need to be addressed separately from efforts at public participation. Wow. Early engagement with potential local opponents can avoid extended delays or project cancellations. Many policy analysts believe that once electricity from renewable energy becomes less expensive than electricity from fossil fuel, new renewable energy facilities will be built quickly across the United States. Cost-effective renewable energy has largely been achieved, but there appear to be substantial barriers to building new renewable energy. So the main thing here is fabrication processes are expensive, cost lots of money to put them up, and they don't hire as many people. And there's a lot of these places, they don't care if you come in there and build something. They want you to hire as many people as possible to build them. And it's just not beneficial right now to move away from if people are saying, hey, they're going to take our jobs, it's not them taking the jobs, they're just creating this free energy system, but then they're going to own it, and more money goes in the hands of a few people. So renewable energy it's completely equatable with Klaus Schwab. You'll own nothing and be happy. It's the only way that they can do it. They're going to own everything. And then, yeah, they're going to make sure people have access to it so long as they work all their lives. We already know this. Oh, the man who killed the most people in history. I'm not going to watch this right now, but you can look into the guy who invented nuclear uranium. The man who killed the most people in history, Veritasium. Check that out at some point. And then, yeah, I think that's enough of his articles. Let me check on you guys really quickly. How's it going? So, jumping through the top chat. Gruesome. That works. I just want to know, when I'm around someone who claims to have ADHD, I feel like, yeah, I did a bunch of math. Yeah, there's a lot of ADHD going on here. But that's part of the plan, is just to go through the study as quickly as possible of whatever's going on today and then move on to the next subject. C60, is that the avocado oil or the carbon? I forget which one C60 is. I think I had avocado oil with C60 in it or something. It's like some Ormus like thing. Buck value. God gave the humans 120 years. Mountain Cat, that's an interesting point. There's this whole thing where people used to live to be like 700 or 800, and then they annoyed God, and then he's like, okay, 120 is like, a fish and a guest. You don't want them too long. And then after that, we're living like 60 until we're back up to 80. But it depends, because this generation might go back down. It depends on who we're talking about. Japanese are up. Technically down for themselves. So, yeah, the Bible does talk about 120, I think it is. But who knows? Because there's also Methuselah, the idea that Judas might be alive, not allowed to die, just so they have to suffer. The vampire myth, 30 pieces of silver, right? There's, and the cross. There's Enoch might not be dead. Is it John? One of the apostles who's not Judas is supposed to still be alive. So, I mean, if you're going by the comic book, there's a lot of issues where people are immortal. Bill Gates. Let's do the Bill Gates article. I was going to do this with Brittany. We're trying to do Lava Line. I don't know if that's going to happen today or if it's going to be tomorrow. I'm going to do like a co-hosty show. Let me just go to the Bill Gates article real quick. And you guys already know this, I think, but it's funny. Futurism. Bill Gates funded the company releasing gene-hacked mosquitoes. I think it was Brittany's friend Jake who talked about mosquito companies that were sanctuaries, like Walt Disney World's a sanctuary, protected, had its own government. There are some pharmaceutical and research lab-owned mosquito sanctuaries that are open space conservatories. And military-based owning of mosquito lands. And you remember from the Disney movie Lilo and Stitch, this idea of a mosquito sanctuary. So mosquito sanctuaries are interesting. He maybe put this idea together that maybe that's where they're doing some of the gene editing. Now, I believe a lot of it had to do with Venezuela. If you look into Bill Gates in Venezuela and the Zika virus, I mean, there's obviously interesting timing. Let's put it that way. But Bill Gates funded the company releasing gene-hacked mosquitoes. Oxitec's work to design gene-edited mosquitoes. The British biotech company Oxitec is moving ahead with its controversial plan to release hundreds of millions of gene-hacked mosquitoes. An experimental new form of targeted pest control in the Florida Keys. Now, there's a couple things here really quickly I want to say. One is it can... Oh, you know what? I'll just read it the way they want to do it. But no, I want to say it myself. They want to kill mosquitoes, perhaps. But really, it's more that they think mosquitoes are great. They're everywhere. They're doing what they got to do. If only mosquitoes could inject into you, instead of malaria, some sort of beneficial gene manipulating, mutating, I want to say toxin, but probably some sort of a material that would be manipulating of your DNA, and to the benefit of the state or the society at large. And that would refer probably to catalyzation supplements. And some of you who know Latin, you'll love that, right? Catalyzation supplements. The British biotech company Oxitec, the goal is essentially to introduce a new genetically altered version of the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which can spread diseases like dengue and malaria that can only hatch male, non-biting offspring in order to gradually reduce the population. A connection that has gone mostly unremarked during the experiment's rollout is the involvement of Microsoft's co-founder and public health philanthropist Bill Gates in the funding of the company. Confirmed by Octatech back in 2018 through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, based on past reports, it seems that the Gates Foundation pledged about $4.1 million to Octatech alone in 2018 to develop a new mosquito that would target malaria in the Americas, South Asia, and in Eastern Africa. Octatech was also reportedly awarded $5 million for its Aedes mosquitoes, the kind set for release in Florida, Disney World. Though and I'll get into also why this. Don't worry about Disney World, because Disney World's got so few mosquitoes. It's amazing. They figured out. I think it was the John Potter or something like that. Joe or John or something Potter was the anti-mosquito genius. And you have to give credit to some of these guys who worked in the 60s at Disney World to try to stop mosquitoes. I mean, come on, it's a swampland. The 120% humidity that you have to gut yourself like a fish just to be there. I mean, it's impressive that they got through it. Anyway, through the Gates Foundation's Global Grand Challenge Initiative in 2010, meanwhile, Science Magazine reported that in 2010, the Gates Foundation had dished out another $19.7 million for a project in which Octatech took part. So it's going to be more like $100 million. If you really start to look at it, it's $40 to $100 million. And probably it's been paced out over 10 years. 14 years. We've reached out to both Octatech and the Gates Foundation for clarification about the relationship. Gates' involvement complicates the already much criticized initiative. On the one hand, the experiment could lead to an extraordinary way to control diseases, potentially saving hundreds of thousands of lives per year. But critics say it could backfire or open up the doors to a more troubling application of the technology, and the idea that one of the world's wealthiest people can help push through gene editing experiments that are unleashed on the open ecosystem is, to say the least, a touchy subject. Eradicating malaria has long been high on the list of Gates' priorities. His philanthropic investment foundation has been pouring money into various fields like malaria vaccine research for years, and he's been pushing for the idea of using genetically modified mosquitoes to eliminate the disease since 2016. That's just 1 year after Octatech finished its first mass mosquito release in Brazil. Now, we should look at that at some point somehow. It's whatever, but just, again, with the Zika virus, man, like, I can't just ignore Zika virus, yo. Let's just, come on. I mean, this is about as close as you can get to telling people what's going on without getting shut down. Mosquitoes that could carry Zika virus found in Des Moines and Lee counties, but none have tested positive for the virus. Well, that's good. That's nice. So regional destruction, because they don't live very long, so it's pretty easy to pick areas that are going to have the Zika virus. But the Zika virus, equatorially, rather present, no? And I don't know. I don't even want to show you the pictures of the babies' heads. So here's an animation. But basically, it doesn't let the baby's head grow right. And so it's this shrunken head voodoo doll kind of horror story that is just the worst thing. How did it happen? Well, there were these isolated cases right after World War II. Isolated virus isolation in, guess what? Monkeys, right? Real believable story. And then first evidence of human infection in Uganda, almost as if organized somehow by the United Nations, then spread in equatorial Africa and into Asia. Micronesia, 2007. Okay, so these are some pretty particular, technologically astute years. And now these hyper mosquitoes that are spreading it in Americas. Boom. Boom. Brazil. Boom. Brazil has huge problems with it. Venezuela didn't know what to do. It's terrifying. So, I mean, did I just make some red line connection there? No, I did not. And you're not allowed to make any correlation between one article and the other, because otherwise I'll get in trouble. But yeah, could be the end of malaria, could be the beginning of new things to come, let's say. So, oh yeah, hey, so that I don't get in trouble. Let's be clear. Gates has often been a magnet for totally unsubstantiated conspiracy theories, which in reality he's contributed billions to worthy causes during his second act as a philanthropist, but he's also sometimes been criticized for making poor public health calls as well. Okay. I mean, I just gotta do what I gotta do. He calls his biotech defense, successful. I read on the internet, oh man, these people with their articles. I gotta be real careful about the things I read. Okay. Further along in Venezuela. And there you go. And he's not wanted for crimes against humanity. Well, okay. I think that pretty much covers what I want to do today. I have a bunch of stuff that we'll do tomorrow that's what I was going to do today that's on the subjects we've been talking about on Gnosticism. But it was time to just show that we can do like a contemporary episode as well. It'll be an interesting thing to try to experiment to mix together history and new information. So I hope that's okay. Let me know if you liked what we did. We'll add more stuff. Welcome to Raccoon City. And yeah, guys and gals and everything in between, it's been an excellent day.